Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the King and Pocket Aces. I'm one of your hosts, Anthony Aniano, and joining me as he does each and every week for the sleepers and value plays here by rotoballer.com this week for week 3 of your fantasy season, my good friend, the King of Fantasy Sports, Scott Engel. Scott, how you doing today?
Doing all right. A little bit of a tough week for the New York Bodega Cats in the whole of Fantasy League. We had the second highest scoring week in the league, but our opponent, Jeff Manns and the Las Vegas Pockets Kings, had the first highest scoring week. But when you get a perfect week from Daniel Jones and a shutout from the Bills defense, got to play a perfect game to beat us. But hey, they did.
And they did. It does happen. It's one of the worst feelings when you're second in points, but you take the L. That is always tough. Guys, don't forget, win big in 2021 with rotoballer.com's NFL Premium Pass. Are you ready to dominate your season-long and DFS leagues? Rotoballer's NFL Premium Pass and Draft Kit includes rankings, projections, and cheat sheets for all formats. Get exclusive DFS tools, lineup optimizers, and premium Slack chats. Join in on the winning. Take 50% off of any premium pass. Use Scott's promo code KING, my promo code ACES, for an additional 10% discount. Visit rotoballer.com/radio. Sign up today. And as they say, start rotoballing like a boss. All right, Scott. Week 3 of the fantasy season is here. It's time to look at some sleepers. So let's go around position by position. I'll come to you first for your sleeper quarterback for week 3.
Sleepers and value plays for week 3 here on Rotoballer YouTube. And I'm going back the same place I did last week.
Yeah, I noticed
Teddy
that. I like it.
Bridgewater again as he faces the New York Jets. So teams have been running effectively on the Jets, but they do give up the big plays. Cortland Sutton's looking very, very good. They have a deep wide receiver crew. There are injuries that you have to deal with at wide receiver, especially in a super flex or 2 quarterback format. And if you need some help at quarterback this week, Teddy Bridgewater, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He might not explode, but 3 touchdown passes are certainly possible against the Jets. He's had 2 in each of the first 2 games.
My sleeper quarterback, and I love Teddy Bridgewater. Love that pick. He made Cortland Sutton very relevant last week after a disappointing week 1. Barely missed Jerry Jeudy. But my sleeper quarterback, Daniel Jones of the New York Giants. Suddenly he's got legs. 95 yards rushing last week, and he is going against the worst defense in terms of giving up fantasy points to the quarterbacks, the Atlanta Falcons, who have already allowed 8 passing touchdowns this season. Daniel Jones showing he can do damage with his legs, okay? And in this situation, can do damage through the air. Sterling Shepard's been great. Kenny Golladay wants the ball more. Daniel Jones against the Falcons, my value quarterback play. All right, Scott.
This might be the last week that you start him. You know, he's going to have 2 fluke weeks back-to-back, and then he's going to go back in the tank.
It may very well be, but it's a matchup game that you got to look for, especially in a 2 quarterback league with all the injuries that have come through some quarterbacks. Daniel Jones, a juicy matchup. First
here's
running
the
back.
context that we need, though, before we get to running back.
Yes.
Do you start Daniel Jones over a more established quarterback who doesn't have as good of a matchup? I saw people do that last week.
Excuse me. Who's like Daniel Jones or Matt Ryan? Matt Ryan, a more established.
Like Daniel Jones or a top 10 quarterback.
No,
who has a more challenging matchup.
That's a tough call. That I have different. There's something about proven track record that is tough to ignore for me. So I look at Daniel Jones, and if I've been streaming quarterbacks, if I waited deep on quarterback, and now I'm kind of playing matchup. Daniel Jones' matchup is great. If I'm in a DFS situation, if I'm in a 2 QB league, and Daniel Jones was my 3rd quarterback, now I bump him up to my quarterback 2. That type of situation, Daniel Jones is a value play in those regards.
Well, here's what some people might think, and here's what I'm trying to lay out is matchup should only be used to govern decisions between 2 similarly valued players.
Yes.
What if somebody is thinking this week, say Tampa Bay plays the Rams, right?
Yeah.
Tom Brady or Daniel Jones. You're not going to
Yeah.
sit Tom
Yeah.
Brady based on a matchup.
Right. Somebody can even say in that same game, what do I do with Matthew Stafford? That Tampa defense was so dominant towards the end of the game against Matt Ryan. And I'm saying no, right? Like, I agree with you. That's a situation you stick with Stafford, you stick with Brady. But if there was another situation where you didn't love the matchup, then Daniel Jones is that streaming option potentially. Same with Teddy Bridgewater, in fact, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so too, but I wouldn't start Bridgewater for Stafford and Brady.
Right.
Sometimes people get caught up, and we're just trying to help people out here to make the right decisions because we want you to win. You don't start a guy purely based on a matchup
No.
because sometimes those lesser players don't always shine in the matchups, and the better players will often win matchups and perform at least respectively in tough matchups. When going against top players, defenses don't always win the matchup.
Mhm. No, great point. And that's what makes some players just you don't bench them. All right, Scott. Let's pivot to the running back position. Your first sleeper value play at the running back position.
I'm going to go with Michael Carter of the Jets.
Yeah.
So far, Denver's hasn't been good against the run. They've been allowing 130 and a half rushing yards per game. Carter showing some real signs of life. If the Jets want to get the offense jump started, I've been saying it through the preseason, they have to give Michael Carter quality work. He's never going to be a full-time back, but he's going to be efficient. He'll make the most of the carries. And I think Michael Carter, they started giving him more run last week. And I think you'll see even more run this week.
I love that pick. I agree with you. You saw Tevin Coleman faded a little bit the last matchup. Michael Carter, his ability to catch the ball and run the ball is useful for the Jets. My sleeper running back, if you've concerned about the Baltimore backfield, I'm saying get Tyson Williams in some lineups this week against Detroit. You saw how Aaron Jones, and I'm not saying Tyson Williams is in Aaron Jones's class, but Tyson Williams is the guy right now. Lat Murray got a touchdown, but Williams averaged 5.9 yards per carry last week and now this week faces a Detroit defense that you can run the ball against. They've allowed 6 total touchdowns to running backs, 4 of them just last week. You can pick on that Detroit defense. It's another great matchup for the Ravens this week. Tyson Williams against Detroit. Find a way to potentially get him in some lineups, Scott. Who is your running back 2?
We got thunder and lightning going in Dallas right now, and it's working. Ezekiel Elliott, I think those who roster him in fantasy are worried about him. But look, Tony Pollard, I think it's Zeke on the inside and Pollard on the outside. This is the best offense in the NFC, and both these running backs are going to continue to eat. It's not just going to be Zeke. And I think Tony Pollard's going to be a big threat on the perimeter against the Eagles this week.
Yep, love that play. Pollard is now becoming a must-start potentially option, depending on what your lineups look like. My second running back, same guy as last week. I'm going back to Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos. Melvin Gordon looked pedestrian last week, 2.4 yards per carry. Javonte Williams, 4.9. And it's a matchup against the Jets defense that's allowing 91 rushing yards per game and allowing 9 receptions and 70 receiving yards per game to opposing running backs. You could check down on this Jets defense for days. Okay, Javonte Williams establishing himself right now as the more efficient runner in Denver. Check his injury tag. Be mindful of that. He was listed as questionable at one point. I expect him to play. If he doesn't and you want to pivot to Mel Gordon, that's okay. But Javonte Williams, I'm excited about his opportunity against the Jets defense this week.
And here's another point that we should make, because a lot of people were concerned about DeAndre Swift being listed as questionable. Questionable, there's the wrong side of questionable, and there's the right side of questionable. Questionable just doesn't mean I don't know if he's going to play. If a player plays on Sunday and he practices limited or full, it really depends more on how much he practices rather than the questionable tag. If a guy practices in limited fashion or even practices in full on Friday and he's listed as questionable, you don't have to worry in a major way about him. I'm not saying he can't be scratched, but usually you should look at the context beneath the questionable tag.
Great point. Absolutely. Javonte Williams, I think, is on the good side of the questionable, as Scott mentioned. Scott, your first sleeper value play at the wide receiver
This is
position.
more of a value play because he's not a sleeper, but Jalen Waddle against the Raiders, I think some people maybe move to faith him against against the Las Vegas Raiders because Jacoby Brissett is going to start instead of Tua Tagovailoa, who's out this week. But Brissett's a pretty good backup. The Raiders have had the worst pass defense in the NFL so far over the past 2 weeks. They're very strong up front in terms of getting a pass rush. But if you can get the ball quickly out to Waddle, Waddle can do a lot of damage after the catch.
Yep, love Waddle, and I'm not afraid of Jacoby Brissett. Tua has a lot to prove. Brissett's been effective in his career. I don't think it's that big a detriment to the Miami wide receivers having Jacoby Brissett under center. My number one value play, sleeper, whatever you want to call it, is Devonta Smith of the Eagles. If you want to fade Devonta Smith after last week's 2 catches for 16 yards, not a move I would make. He still led the team in targets last week with 7 targets in a tough game that the Eagles played. They play a much more generous pass defense this week against the Cowboys, who are allowing almost 50 points a game to the wide receiver position. Okay, Devonta Smith was still Jalen Hurts' favorite target with those 7 targets. Don't run away from Devonta Smith. He'll have opportunities this week against the Cowboys. Scott, your wide receiver 2.
A lot of people are going to be fading the Jacksonville Jaguars this week as they go against Arizona. Arizona's got a terrific pass rush. And whenever Trevor Lawrence gets pressure, his mechanics just fall apart. But we also have to look that Arizona has given up the 3rd most passing yards per game so far. So even if he has a 2 touchdown, 3 interception day, he's going to make some plays. And I believe Marvin Jones is the guy that he can trust the most as the best combination of playmaking ability and veteran experience. So I'm going to go with Marvin Jones as a value play this week.
Excellent pick. Marvin Jones coming off a touchdown last week. Scott, for my second wide receiver, I was really tempted to double down and go back to Quintez Cephas again this week. But I decided against it, even though I love Cephas again with this matchup against Baltimore. But I'm going to pivot, but stay in the same game. Guys, it's time to consider Marquise Brown as a legitimate weekend in, week out start. He's emerging as Lamar Jackson's go-to guy. Okay, 10 targets, 6 receptions, 113 yards, and a touchdown last week going against that Detroit defense. If you've been watching Scott for the first couple of weeks, Scott and I for the first couple of weeks, we love picking on that Detroit defense. I'm going to do it again. Baltimore should be able to handle that defense pretty easily. Marquise Brown emerging this year as Lamar Jackson's go-to receiver. Get him in your lineups. Scott, your tight end 1 for week 3.
Good first week for Tyler Higbee. Not a good second week for Tyler Higbee. Still get heavy snap counts. I think they want to get him involved. Tampa Bay's pass defense has not been as good as expected. They've been the 5th worst pass defense over the first 2 weeks. This is going to be a shootout. The Buccaneers are going to be concentrating on how they can contain Cooper Kupp, which is going to open up other opportunities for other pass catchers. I think Tyler Higbee is a sneaky play this week.
Like Tyler Higbee, useful this week. My tight end, Chicago Bears, Cole Kmet. Okay, Jimmy Graham has been slowly faded out. It's Cole Kmet's job as the tight end of the Bears. Justin Fields starting. Every young quarterback loves a solid tight end to check down to when need be. And he faces a Browns team that's allowing 15 points a game to the tight end. On average per game, it's 4 catches, 48 yards, and a touchdown to the tight end. That's works out to be that 14.9 points per game. Week 1, Kmet was involved. 7 targets, 5 receptions. Didn't do much week 2. I expect him to rebound week 3 with Justin Fields and against that Cleveland secondary. All right, Scott. Guys, this has been fun as it always is. Hey, make sure you follow Scott on Twitter at Scott E. The King. Follow me on Twitter at Aniano Fantasy. And Scott, just real quick, this has been fun as always, my friend.
It always has. It always will be. And we're here We're here to help you. We're here to help you win in week 3. It's all about you guys.
Absolutely. Make sure you check us out every week on Rotoballer's YouTube channel or wherever you listen to Rotoballer Radio's podcast. Stay smart, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one, folks.